Welcome to today's episode of Your Marketing Mentor, the podcast where I, Sherry Sutton, your marketing mentor, talks all things marketing and small business and podcasting because I love podcasting. I believe that it is the easiest way to create content if you're a small business owner. So you take one conversation or one thing of you just sitting here talking to a screen like me, and you can repurpose it into all sorts of different content. So you can have social content, blogs, articles, you can create press releases. There's so many different things that you can do with podcasting beyond just sort of what you think of as the traditional podcast. So I'm a huge fan of podcasting. I talk about it a lot, and I actually want to talk about it a little bit today as well. So last year in 2025, I started something called the Podcast Launch Lab, and it was designed as a DIY course for people who really wanted to start a podcast, learn how to take this one conversation and make it into all sorts of marketing tools. And they want to learn how to do that in a very easy step-by-step process that doesn't only teach them all the, technology stuff, but also teaches them the strategy of why do you create a podcast and how do you utilize it to grow your business? Because just creating a podcast just because it's fun is great, but that's a hobby. We want to create podcasts that are used to generate revenue, give you increased authenticity, increased authority, and bring new leads in. So I did the class at the end of 2025. We had an amazing group of students, and they're all launching their podcast this month. I'm recording this in January of 2026. And I wanted to share with you a few things that I learned working with a group of brand new podcasters. Because if you're thinking about starting a podcast, you might be like, oh gosh, I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about that, or, how is it going to build in with my business? And so I wanted to share with you 4 things that were kind of my key takeaways in working with brand new podcasters. Okay. So the first thing is podcasts can change with your business. And what I mean by that is a podcast can support your business in lots of different ways. We tend to think of a podcast as, okay, I'm just going to put it on all the podcasting places and then I'm done. But you really want to look at a podcast as something that can change strategically with where you are with your business. What are the types of leads that you want to generate? Let me give you an example. So one possible reason to start a podcast is as a lead generator for your business and a way to have deeper conversations with the people that you want to sell to. So you could have a podcast where, let's say you sell to small business owners and you sell to small business owners who are veterinarians. Let's say you could start a podcast where you interview veterinarians about why they decided to become a vet, what their favorite part of the job is, and so forth. So yes, that's great content, build your authority within the veterinary space as somebody who knows what they're talking about. But it's also an opportunity to sit down one-on-one with a veterinarian who is a potential client for you, building a deeper relationship. You're helping them to get more engagement, you're helping them to get more eyeballs, which every small business needs. And so by helping them, you're also creating a deeper relationship that could also lead to sales down the road. So in that type of a strategy, doesn't matter how many people see the podcast, right? And I know that sounds sacrilege. Everyone wants 1 million people watching all of their videos. But sometimes it's okay to say, you know what? The goal of this podcast is not to get 1 million views, not to find maybe new veterinarians, but it would be great. But it's actually for me to have an excuse to develop deeper relationships with the veterinarians that I already know. That is a very solid strategy. So it might be a tool for biz dev and not just a tool for lead generation. And so the format of the podcast and the purpose of the podcast can change based on your business strategy. And that's okay. And that's why at the beginning of the podcast launch lab, we really deeply root into what is your business strategy? Why are you doing this? And how is this going to drive business for you? It might not be new leads, right? It might be a way to get additional business with your existing clients, or it could be a way to get deeper relationships with potential leads. There's lots of different ways to use a podcast, so you want to think outside the box with that. And I have, everybody in the podcast launch lab has a little bit of a different take on this, but I can tell you it was one of the biggest ahas to them about how they could use a podcast in different ways to meet the different aspects of their business and marketing strategy. So that was my first takeaway. My second takeaway is fear of speaking is totally normal, but it can be overcome. And nothing will bring out all your crazy like marketing your own business. And I can tell you that for me too, right? Like I'm like super sensy about my hairline. I've gotten very sensy about my hairline because I do a lot of videos like this and I'm looking at my hairline all day long. And like it's become this whole like thing that takes up space in my brain. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit that. But I'm not alone, right? You're either going to think, oh God, I look weird, or I smile weird, or how do I know what to say? Or, do I use a teleprompter? Do I just talk? What do I do? What if I say something stupid, right? There is so much fear around marketing your business, especially when you do a podcast and you are committing to talk about your business or talk to someone else about, your business or about who you are or your authority in the space on a regular basis, right? That can be very scary for people. And I wanted to share a couple resources that different people in my podcast launch lab use. So I actually had one woman who went to a Reiki healer. She went to a Reiki healer to help her process whatever like energy it was that was, causing her to have so much fear in front of the camera. And I think that that's really, really a neat way to do it. You can see a therapist. I've had people who I have told, hey, look, I can coach you only so much. Probably the best thing might be to see a therapist or a hypnotherapist or something like that, just so you can work out what are the things that are bringing up that much fear. Generally, it is things from our childhood. Someone told us, hey, be quiet, especially for women, you're not supposed to speak up. You're not supposed to be big. You're not supposed to be loud. You're not supposed to take up space. And this is true in different cultures as well. It's a little bit stronger in some cultures than in others. And so sometimes you just have to unwind that. I had a lot of that, frankly, to unwind from my childhood. My mom was lovely, but she was raised in an era where, women were small. The man always made all the decisions. The man made the money. Women didn't run their own businesses until like 1969. Women weren't even allowed to, you automatically had your name changed to your husband's name. Women weren't allowed to buy property in the United States, I think until like the early 70s. It's crazy. And I don't know if all those statistics are right. You guys can put in the comments if I got it wrong. But you get the idea. Is she was raised in an era where women just didn't own their voices. Women didn't literally own businesses. And so it was very difficult for me when it came time to be the face of my brand to kind of work through all of that. I had the ability to do it because I'm a trained actress and I did a lot of improv, but doing it as my authentic voice is something very different and was something very scary. And that happens for a lot of people. So, as my second takeaway, it's normal to have fear. And it's okay. Often starting a podcast or marketing your business is a great way to start figuring out how to get over that. So my third takeaway is podcasting or any kind of consistent content creation or consistent marketing is going to take time and it has to be scheduled. it has to be a commitment that you're willing to commit to over the long haul. I was looking at my metrics today for my Heart of the Hustle show, and that's a show that I started about a year ago. It's a interview podcast with amazing entrepreneurs, and it's really a content creation opportunity where people come onto my show, we chat for, an hour or so, and then I repurpose it all into done for you content for my clients. But I was looking at the trajectory of, downloads over time, and they've gone up steadily over time. They don't hockey stick, right? They're not going to go straight up and all of a sudden you're going to have, 10,000 downloads a day. It's not how it works. Even with the biggest podcasters, even with somebody like Mr. Beast, and I have a whole other episode on Mr. Beast, but even somebody like Mr. Beast, it's slow and steady growth over time and requires you to show up consistently on an ongoing basis. But what that means is that doing a podcast, or whether it's doing podcasts or reels or whatever the thing is that you're committing to do, to regularly do content, it has to be a commitment. It has to be something that's scheduled. It doesn't have to be all day, every day, but it's got to be a commitment. One of the things that I've seen with the people on my who've gone through my podcast launch lab is some got a little overwhelmed with like, okay, I'm not quite ready to actually do this because it's a lot, or I'm not sure what my content is, my business is changing, those types of things. Some people were like, oh, I didn't really realize that this was going to be, a kind of this amount of effort. I don't really have time for it. Or they just weren't willing to take the time for it, right? Lead gen isn't as important for them, or marketing their business isn't as important for them. And I can tell you, in my opinion, every company needs to be doing marketing and generating new leads, because you never know, right, what's going to happen with your existing client base. And so you want to always be doing marketing and always be creating new leads. So, but it is one of those things that if you're going to do it, you got to commit to it for the long term. And it's okay to take some holidays. I mean, I haven't done a Your Marketing Mentor in about a month because it was December and we got super busy, and then it was the holidays, and no one's listening over the holidays anyway. So we did take a little bit of time off to reset and renew. So that type of thing is okay, but you want to make sure that you're being super, super consistent. You know when you're coming back to it. Once you do it, you're committed to do it every other week at least. And that, you've got time scheduled on your calendar. That to me is one of the most important things. When I go off the rails and don't have a podcast ready to go, which does happen to me, it's because I haven't scheduled time or put aside time to do the recordings. So that's my third takeaway is it is a commitment, and it needs to be scheduled, and it needs to be something that you're committing to for the long term, because you're not going to see results right away. And that's true with most of your marketing. All right. My fourth takeaway is that DIYing your podcast isn't for everyone. So I told you earlier that my podcast launch lab is designed to teach people how to DIY their podcast. So how to create the business strategy. What makes a good podcast? What's good content for a podcast? What's the format for it? I teach you Riverside, which is my absolute favorite editing software. Shout out to Riverside. We'll put a link below to if you want to get Riverside. I absolutely love it. I'm one of their partners, and they're pretty incredible. So I teach you how to use Riverside, which is a great DIY editing software, but it does require some time. I teach you Captivate, which is how you upload things to the podcasting platforms. I'll show you how to upload things on YouTube. I'll show you how to make thumbnails on Canva, and I'll give you your intro and your outro. But it is a complex process, and it does take some time, and it is a new skill set that you need to learn. So one of the things that I found out of the podcast launch lab this last time was there were some people who got through the course, learned everything, and were like, I'm so glad I know how to do this, because it'll be great for like shorter videos I need to do, maybe a quick video for my client. But I realized that the time that I would need to spend producing my own podcast isn't worth it for the amount of money I could make during those hours. And I want you to be thinking about that for every business decision that you make. Is if I need to put in 3 hours for this podcast or whatever it is, could I be making more money than I need to spend to have someone do it for me during those 3 hours. So let's say during those 3 hours, you could focus on, having a lesson, a one-on-one meeting with one of your clients. And let's say you make $100 an hour. So you could make $300 during that 3 hours that you would spend editing your podcast, or you could spend, let's say, $100 having someone else do it for you. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? You get 2 hours of time back. And it's one of those things that you need to be thinking of as a business owner is, where is my time most spent with the most value? I was going to say most valuably. Is that a word? Is that valuably a word? Let's look that up. But I can tell you, I actually learned this firsthand when I was doing my photography business full time. So for those of you who don't know my background, I was in corporate America for 15 years or so, doing marketing for all sorts of companies, big and small. Then when my son was young, I decided to do photography full time, and I became a wedding photographer, actually one of the top wedding photographers in the New York City area pretty quickly. And it was so fun. I absolutely loved it. But after the first year, I got to this place where I was like, okay, let me really evaluate where I'm spending my time, and am I spending my time in the best way possible? So I looked at every single wedding that I did, and I said, okay, I spend about a week's worth of work on the wedding. So about 1 day on marketing, talking to the couple, getting them their contract, right? Depositing their check, all of that. Then I spend 1 day at the wedding itself, and then 3 days in editing, uploading, and getting the files to the couple. So I said, okay, if I look at how much I'm charging per wedding, and I break it down by the hour for 7 days, for those 7 days, am I making the amount of money that I want to make? And I was like, well, no. Okay, well, what parts of that process do I really need to be in? Right? What is only Sherry able to do? And that was the marketing and the sales and the actual photography on the day of the wedding. Those other 3 days that I was spending doing editing was absolutely something that I could outsource, and outsource relatively inexpensively. So I made the decision to take every wedding that I did and outsource the editing. So now I was like, okay, I have 3 more days a week to market my business. How do I get more leads during that time? And I dedicated those extra 3 days a week to marketing. And I can tell you, within a couple months, I tripled my business without much overlay for the actual editing of the photographs. And so that was such a good lesson to me, where yes, sometimes it's scary to spend the money. Be like, oh my God, I'm spending money and I don't make enough money. But very quickly, if you realize, okay, but if I spent that time that I was just staring at my computer and used it for sales and marketing, which are my strengths, then I can make more money. And it absolutely worked. Again, I tripled my business within a couple months after doing that. So when it comes to podcasting and when it comes to the students in the Podcast Launch Lab, DIYing isn't for everyone. A few of the students actually converted to our visibility management, our podcast management offer, just because they're like, you know what, this isn't going to be worth it for the amount that you charge versus what I could do with the time that I would need to spend actually producing this. It doesn't make sense, financially for the business. Now, some of them are still doing DIY, or what they're going to, their plan is, let me DIY until it gives me enough visibility that I start getting some clients. Once I get to this level of revenue, then I'm going to go ahead and outsource, either hopefully to me and our team, but maybe to someone else as well. So those are my 4 takeaways from the Podcast Launch Lab. The first one is, podcasts are changeable with your business strategy and can help you in different parts of your business strategy that maybe you haven't thought of before. The second one is, fear is normal and totally overcomable. 3 is, podcasting is a commitment that you need to schedule and commit to for the long term. And the 4th is that DIYing isn't for everyone. You just have to look and see what makes the most sense for your business. So I hope this was super helpful. If this whole Podcast Launch Lab thing sounds amazing to you, our next class starts on February 6th of 2026, depending on when you're listening to this, or We're going to probably be doing this again in October of 2026. So my plan is to do this twice a year, every year for as long as y'all want it. So I'm so excited. If you are interested in learning more about it, you can head over to my website. It's sherrysutton.com and click on the podcast course link, and I will see you inside the lab.